Okay, for further analysis, let's bring in National Senator Matt Canavan and Leader of the WA Opposition, Basil Zempilas. Great to see you guys. Matt, there's been a very patronising attitude towards these tariffs, but this is what Trump campaigned on. It's what he said he was going to do. It's why Americans, particularly in the working class states, voted for him.
Well, Shari, I wish Donald Trump and the US administration weren't putting these tariffs on Australia, but I didn't get a vote on the US presidency. He's been elected, as you say, he was elected on that platform. What we need to do is respond in the way we best can to protect Australia's interests. That's what we should do. And it's been instructive this week that finally I see the Prime Minister say that in his response to Donald Trump's tariffs, he's going to put Australia first. Well, why hasn't he been putting Australia first the whole time? Why has it taken Donald Trump for him to say something like that and encourage people to buy Australian-made products? I actually think I have this sort of sneaking suspicion that Anthony Albanese actually was relishing this outcome. He seemed almost giddy this morning. I don't think he's put up much of a fight here to try to stop these tariffs coming in. He's actually almost welcoming this because it gives him something to campaign on and apparently look tough, etc. But he's not being tough. He's not putting Australia first because, as you've just said in your editorial, he's smashing the Australian people with higher energy prices, higher grocery prices. I mean, if we're going to have this sort of reaction from the Prime Minister for a 10% tariff on some of our exports to the US, which are just 5% of our exports, if it's going to generate a 10% tariff, is going to generate that sort of outrage, why isn't the Prime Minister as outraged as the 30% increase in grocery prices that Australian families have had to suffer under his leadership? Why isn't he focused on that? Why isn't he focused on the self-imposed tariffs that his government is placing on our energy system, in our grocery supermarkets, through our transport businesses as well, that are adding costs onto everybody? I wish he was so angry about the damage he's doing to the Australian economy compared to only being angry about the responses he doesn't like being made by Donald Trump.
Yeah, such a good point. Basil, what's your view on the tariffs, but also how this played out today? Do you agree with me that there was this overreaction to what is going to impact Australia really in quite a minimal way?
Well, that could be the case. In fact, you could argue, and we won't know the full effects until we get going through the process, but you could argue that, in fact, Australian beef producers may, in fact, end up being better off. Donald Trump is playing to his base, and by appearing to try and stand up to Donald Trump, although pretty mildly, I agree with Matt, the Prime Minister is playing to his base, who you would naturally accept are not Donald Trump people. That sort of makes sense. But I can't help watching this think, if Anthony Albanese was serious, and we know Donald Trump is a relationship guy, if he's trying to make this election somehow a referendum on who's going to deal better with Donald Trump and his tariffs, I think he's playing into Peter Dutton's hands. Peter Dutton will get on a plane, he'll get over there, and he'll get on well with Donald Trump. And it feels to me that relationships could have averted this tariff imposition that's come onto Australia, and that's not a trump card, pardon the pun, that Albanese has played. And I've got to say also, the Rudd stuff now really coming back to bite. It was always going to, it really is now.
No, absolutely. Well, one thing that could make a difference in the negotiations to have this 10% lifted, if it's worth it, is potentially removing those biosecurity protocols around American beef. It is something that Angus Taylor says we should consider. I asked him about this in a pre-recorded interview. Have a quick look.
But at the end of the day, I mean, we should always be looking at our biosecurity protocols and making sure they're fit for purpose.
Something we should consider examining.
But what we should always be considering those protocols, and we should be asking our customers to consider them.
Matt, what do you think about this? I mean, mad cow disease is extremely rare now in the United States. As Andrew Bolt said earlier, people aren't getting sick in America from eating beef, so why is it banned?
Look, Shari, you might expect me as a Nationals Party politician to take a slightly different perspective on this. We're very lucky to have a very strong biosecurity system, and the costs of having mad cow disease come to this country would be in the tens of billions. I think it's been measured at about $40 billion impact on Australia. It'd be huge. We'd have massive culls, there'd be movements of cattle restricted. It would be horrible for our nation, so we want to keep it out. Now, in terms of the US, you're right to say that since the US did have a case in 2003 or some case in 2003. They have got rid of it largely in their own country. But the problem is the US has not been able to assure us that the beef that we would or could import from the US could not contain Mexican or Brazilian beef where there is mad cow disease. Now, it's not actually exactly true to say that we ban American beef. We do allow American beef to come into Australia if it can show that it is actually American beef. Unfortunately, the United States does not have the kind of supply chain assurance that we do in this nation, so they can't give us a guarantee that what's in the box has actually come from a Texas farm or a Californian farm and not a farm from south of the border. So look, I support our biosecurity system. I think our provisions here, our rules here are very reasonable. We are happy to work with the US if they can apply some kind of supply chain assurance that we have in this country. If they can do that, we're happy to talk. If they can't, look, we've got to put our biosecurity first.
Okay, interesting. Look, making news today as well is the fact that the Prime Minister had a bit of a tumble at a mining conference. Here he was.
Some photos with everyone, okay?
Perhaps it's when Albanese starts falling up the stairs like Joe Biden did that we have to worry. Basil, he actually tried to hold on to the leg of one of the union members that was there, but look, he was quick to recover and turn this into a joke. I guess these things happen and then they suddenly become a story when you're in the middle of a campaign.
They do. I don't love that stuff. I mean, I think they're cheap shots all round, and not anyone in particular that's taking them, but obviously they become a story for the evening news. We get it. I don't think Australians generally love that sort of stuff. Everybody's going to stumble or tumble at times, and I think a little bit of discretion and a little bit of fair play for everybody. Nonetheless, grabbing onto the leg of a union official, maybe it is representative of other things that are at play at the moment. And unfortunately, these incidents always open themselves up to those sorts of lines, don't they?
Yeah.